Oh. 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 Hello and welcome back to my YouTube. So in this video I'm going to be wrapping up my season, going through the mistakes that I've made, what I would have done differently, and also the game plan next moving forward into this off season, including who my new coach is. We started prep at the start of May at £238. Now, before this, I was ill. I had the shits and I lost a lot of weight, and it didn't come, my appetite was terrible, so I didn't really regain that weight. So we started prep at a little bit of a loss. Potentially some muscle was lost, but we did start looking quite flat, so that wasn't an excellent starting position. Now, in regards to the starting composition, I was a little bit too fluffy. Looking back now, I would have definitely started leaner. That would have put me in a better position to get into condition and made the prep a lot easier. The prep from there was pretty smooth. We had a nice steady rate of loss moving forward, but we were slightly behind going into the first show. And the first show, the Race Street Royal Rumble, 2 bros, the aim was to go into light heavies. Now, it was a little bit of a tricky one because I was in between the 2 weights. If we were a little bit more ahead of schedule, we probably could have landed in the light heavies a little bit easier, but towards the end we did rush it a little bit. There was the inclusion of fat burners, and from there we definitely leaped forward in conditioning, and that helped me to achieve the best conditioning I've ever been in at that point. But unfortunately it came at the detriment of performance. There was a big drop off in performance. I was losing like loads of reps on stuff, and you know, sometimes I would go in, I would be a plate down, and that had a knock-on effect in fullness and potentially muscle retention as well. Now, despite this, I really like the look going into the initial show. We again, we're trying to make weight, and we're very, very close to that weight cap. So the peak week we were very flat up until the night before. And as you guys probably have seen if you've been watching these videos, I had a 5 guys to fill out the night before. Again, didn't fully fill up because of how flat we were, but we were able to still showcase a decent amount of muscularity and conditioning, and it was I was able to achieve 2nd place, and it was arguably a very close decision. Which is good. The winner was of incredible standard, and also earned the qualification for the Arnolds. Now, going into the Arnolds a couple of weeks after, we had a different game plan where we really wanted to ramp up the fullness. So moving forward into that, we pushed the carbs, especially on the peak week. We ended up doing a few days of 1,200 grams of carbs. Now, this saw me gain over 10 pounds on stage weight. Condition was still kept pretty well, and a lot of fullness was gained, but we did overspill, and that saw us not placing at the Arnold's, which, you know, the Arnold's is arguably the biggest show in the UK for amateurs. The amateur Arnold's, the lineup was incredibly competitive, especially in the heavyweights, which is what we went into. I would like to say I did hold my own, but overspilling definitely hindered me, and I'll be back potentially on actually placing. This was the first show I didn't place. It hurt, man. It did hurt a little bit, but this was just a mistake. We're just trying to find that balancing act. Now, after this, we sort of realised that we needed to really chase after condition. We can't play the size game if the size isn't there. And you know, the more I sort of push for fullness, and if I get softer and overspill a little bit, that ruins the lines and my shape that I was able to showcase. Moving forward, a couple of weeks after that, we had a 2-show weekend, and these were the qualifiers for the PCA finals and the FedEx finals. Now that week, those 2 weeks, were living hell. At this point, I'd been prepping for roughly 22 weeks. So it'd been a long prep already. The body was getting quite tired, but we still dug quite hard. I wasn't sleeping well. My sleep was slowly deteriorating, and those two weeks, it was pretty much non-existent. I got to a point where I just would barely sleep. The energy was, of course, terrible, and performance in the gym, again, went back to dropping off massively. But we were able to pull back that conditioning and arguably get to the best conditioning at that point that I've ever been at. But again, this potentially could have cost a little bit of muscle along the way. Now, like I said, the body was very, very tired. I was essentially the last 2 weeks going into those shows, I locked myself away in my flat. I didn't really want to speak to anyone. I spoke to my clients and stuff. They were the only people I really spoke to. I would only leave the house to go to the shop and to go to the gym. Didn't really speak to anyone in the gym. Even my training partner, I stopped training with him. I just kept myself to myself because I just could not be social at that point. I felt fucking horrible, and towards the end of prep you do. And you know, this could be dieting for a long time, being staged lean, digging very, very hard, but also the inclusion of drugs such as, you know, things like the stimulants such as Clen, and the anabolic side, Tren and stuff was in, and these can definitely affect sleep. And again, all these things have a knock-on effect. So they were definitely the toughest weeks in the prep for sure. Now going into these shows, we managed to bring a good look, but we still had this issue of, by the time we got on stage, holding a little bit of water. And I'm not sure if it was because my body was quite stressed, or because, you know, the peak wasn't exactly placed right. But the emphasis in those shows wasn't to really peak 100% for that, because the aim was to go into the finals. Now, we achieved like 3rd place in both of them, actually, which frustrated me because I did want to qualify and actually win these shows, because my plan was to do very well at the finals. And to do very well at the finals, you got to do very well at the qualifiers. And I'm not saying top 3 isn't, you know, isn't decent, but in my opinion, I thought if I'm just about making top 3 in the qualifiers, the finals, it's not really worth it to have a couple of extra weeks doing that. The detriment on my health and what I was going to continue putting myself through to potentially not place where I wanted to, it just was not worth it for me. So I decided to call the season a day. Like I said, I was in a position where, like, for some reason my face was blowing up towards the end of prep. I was the leanest I've ever been, but I had an off-season face. My eyes were puffy, so there were visible signs that something wasn't quite right. So again, this solidified my decision to end the prep. It was sort of a risk to reward. Admittedly, I did feel like a bitch. I felt like I was bitching out. And that took a little bit of a while to, that sort of made the decision a little bit harder, because I like to see things through. If I say I'm going to do something, I want to do it. I want to go through with it. But again, in the grand scheme of things, was it worth that? Was it worth delaying the off season, knowing I needed to add more muscle, which is really what I needed to do, and also again prolong your recovery and potentially detriment to my health further? In my opinion, no. So again, that was my decision not to do that. But this season, as I've said at the start of everything, was all about perspective. And it was my first assisted prep. as well. I wanted to compete in some of the hardest shows I could find in the UK, and I believe I did that. I went against some incredible athletes who, you know, they were phenomenal, of a phenomenal standard, and I would like to think I held my own quite nicely in comparison to them. So the perspective is, there is potential there for me as a bodybuilder, I would like to say, but more time is needed. Now, there are things, again, I would have done differently. So just to summarise that, I would have started leaner. I would have held on to performance better. Probably, most likely, utilised drugs and fat burners a little differently, and you know, just not dropping as much weight, because I dropped close to like 50 pounds. I think would have made a big difference. And even if I was to have the same physique and approach it differently, learning from the mistakes that we made this prep, I think the outcome could have been very different. Now, I'm not saying it would have, who knows, because you can never guarantee these things. And it's important for you guys to know it's not me making a bunch of excuses or whatever, it's just me objectively looking at the season and trying to pick out the lessons from it and how I could approach this differently. This is what a lot of bodybuilders go through. They try something out and it doesn't work. And that's what bodybuilding is. It's trial and error and refining your approach. And I believe next time round the approach is going to be far better. But that is because of this season. This season has allowed that. This season has taught me a lot. It's given me a perspective of where I am as an athlete, where my trajectory is, what my standard is, but also the do's and don'ts. Because we did do a lot of things right. It wasn't just an entire fuck up. I wouldn't say it was a fuck up at all. Now, how do I feel about the season? I would have liked to have got a win at some point. So I was a little bit gutted at that, but at the end of the day, they were hard shows, and it is who turns up at the day, and you cannot control that. And at the end of the day, if I was not good enough to win, I'm not good enough. So more time is needed. And this brings me to the next part, the off season. The off season. The off season. And who's the new coach I'm working with? So before I go to this, I just want to say, me not working with AJ is no reflection on his coaching abilities. He is fantastic, and he is the best person I've worked with, and was a very, very close friend of mine, and I love him to bits. But moving forward, I wanted to have a different approach and try new things. So my new coach is, that was supposed to be a drum roll, hold on. My new coach is Jack Richardson. Yes, it is me. I am self-coaching. I am coaching myself. Now, the reason for this is, again, I want to try new things, and I'm a coach myself. So me trying these new things and having the process of trial and error will help me be a better athlete, I believe, but also a better coach, because I can try these things, know that they work, and then give my clients a similar approach. I will never trial things out on clients unless I'm physically unable to try them myself. I would always prefer to try them out on myself first. Moving forward in the off season, the aim is to gain a decent amount of muscle, which is going to require some time away from the stage. The priority is to add muscle, of course, in the right places, in the upper, for me, I believe. More specifically, the delts and the back, I believe, need to come up. The split that I have put together complements that very well. At the moment, it is a pull, push, rest, upper-ish type of day, and legs, and then rest, repeat. And this definitely prioritizes what I need. My legs are sort of ahead of the game. I've never had any issues with growing them. Even when I've been injured, they've never been behind. So that tells me I could just pay more attention to the upper without the detriment of my legs. And I believe if I build up my back and my delts, especially, that's going to accentuate my shape. Now, one of the things going into the season, which I gained perspective of, was I didn't realise how much of a shape I have. Because in the off season, I hold a lot of body fat around my waist, and I look very, very blocky. And because of that, in the off season, I made the decision not to do classic, and I went for open because I just didn't think I had the structure for it. But as I actually leaned down, I wanted to actually try classic and give that a go, but I was just a little bit too heavy. But this fills me, again, it was a lot of perspective, so I'm quite happy with that. And this is why it's important to compete for perspective. I'm not saying compete all the time, but competing for perspective is definitely useful, because I've also found out what my physique looks like with that additional muscle. And from there, I can know where to place more additional muscle to accentuate that shape that I have. And I believe bigger lats, bigger shoulders is definitely going to help. It's going to help with that X frame, make my waist look tighter, and hopefully be a more dominant bodybuilder on stage. That's the summary of the off season. It's always important to look at yourself objectively, look at the things that you have done right, of course, but also the things that you could have done better. This is how we learn and we improve, and this is how we move forward. And it's always worth being honest. And I'll always be honest with you guys. If you guys have any questions about my approach to things, I'll be honest. As of now, after the show, I have taken the Matt Jensen approach, and I had, I've had 3 weeks. It's roughly 3 weeks now. I've had 3 weeks and 300 milligrams of test and 300 milligrams of Primo. Growth 4 IU has been inputted with slow acting insulin of 20 IU. Now, those two compounds, growth and insulin, are brand new to me. So these are the new things that I'm utilizing in the off season. And I already am seeing a crazy change. I'm about 20 pounds up, and the conditioning hasn't really faded too much. And this is obviously down to food as well. I've been eating plenty, but I've never had a rebound like this before. I've never experienced anything like this. So strength's flying. I seem to be growing in all the right places, or filling out in the right places so far. And this makes me quite optimistic moving forward. Slightly different approach to things, even moving on in the off season. Hopefully a better approach, but only time will tell whether the approach is the right approach. But yeah, I hope you guys have enjoyed this sort of wrap up. I hope it's giving you a little bit of an insight on stuff. And until next time, so I will be starting a new series, and I will be going through my new split, what I'm currently eating, my new diet and stuff like that. If there's anything you guys want to see, let me know. Oh God, I know. Oh, I feel a bit gassy. Let me know in the comment section below. If you haven't already subscribed, turn the notifications on, all that bullshit. But until next time, thank you guys for watching.